Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the class Buddhism 305, Buddhism in East Asia. And today's date is May 8th, 2023. And today is the midterm examination, as I told you last time. Maybe some of you have got some confusions because usually the midterm was supposed to be last week, but in this class I changed it a little bit. So today is the midterm according to our schedule, okay? So what we're gonna do today is to engage in a little bit of review of what we did over the last 5 weeks. Yes, 5 weeks. Today is the 6th week. So a little bit of review, and then you will get the exam in your email. So as usual, just like you did your homework assignments, answer the questions. There will be 2 or 3 questions, and I will grade you according to your answers, okay? So a little bit of review, because you know what we did already, because it's only 5 weeks. So Buddhism in East Asia. So at the very beginning, we discussed about what East Asia is. What do we refer by East Asia? Usually it is China, Korea, and Japan. So in this class, our focus will be on those countries, how Buddhism came to those countries, and how Buddhism developed in those countries, and what types of schools and traditions came into being based on Buddhism in those foreign lands. So before we jumped into the subject, we were looking at what Buddhism is, right? At the beginning, we were talking about how Buddhism came into existence in India, and Indian history, Buddhist history, what important events took place, and how those important events shaped the form of Buddhism in India. So we discussed those things in detail. Buddha's birth, his enlightenment, his passing away, and all those big events. And at the same time, formation of the Tripitaka. Remember how the Buddhist teachings were preserved after the passing of the Buddha, and then the first council, second council, and the third council. First council after 3 months of the passing of the Buddha, second council after like 100 years, and the third one about 250, 240 years later, so during the time of King Ashoka. So these events, we just referred to them, and we saw a very important king, very important emperor in India, the Mauryan Empire, King Ashoka, how he became a Buddhist, and how he sponsored Buddhism in big way. He sponsored Buddhism in his own land, in India, Mauryan Empire, and also he propagated Buddhism into many different countries. He sent missionaries to different countries, including Sri Lanka, and then Buddhism became, a world religion after King Ashoka. If not for King Ashoka, Buddhism would be only limited to India. Maybe later somebody else might do it, but He's the one who did it first, who popularized Buddhism in his country, as well as who shared it with the neighboring countries and far off places too. And we saw that he sent 9 missionaries. Important thing is his own son and daughter, both of them became monk and nun, and they also were sent out as missionaries. They both went to Sri Lanka. Sri Lanka became early country in the history to receive Buddhism and still flourishing afterwards over 26, 25 centuries, almost 25 centuries. So this, that's King Ashoka. So he's one of the greatest king in terms of propagation of Buddhism, as early as in, 3rd century BCE. So that's very important. And then we saw that in the second council, of course, Buddhist Sangha, there was a division and big group and the small group, like that. We was looking at those things, and then the Buddhism that crossed over to China in about 2 centuries later, in the 2nd century CE, or the 1st century CE, around that time, Buddhism that went to China is influenced by Indian Mahayana Buddhism, right? That's why China became a Mahayana country. And we looked at what Mahayana was, how it came into being, the basic tenets, basic teachings, and how it developed in India, right? So last week, of course, we were discussing about that thing, and so now, let's say Buddhism reached China through the Silk Route. You know the Silk Route? Silk Route is the ground. There are 2 types of Silk Route because the merchants traveled to far off lands very, very long time ago in the history. They were traveling from place to place to engage in business. They carried silk from India to many different parts of the world. And from China, of course, they brought many other items, silk and other things. That's why it's called Silk Route. Chinese silk went into different parts of the world through this merchant road. Then it's called Silk Route. So one of the great things that they did was the merchants, they carried Buddhist monks in their shipments. Buddhist monks were along with the merchant. Buddhist monks traveled in these different lands, and then Buddhism got an opportunity to encounter with other cultures. The monks were able to have some access to the other lands and be, in contact with other nations, other countries, other cultures. And that's how Buddhism became popular among other countries. That's how China actually got Buddhism, through the Silk Route, with the help of merchants and Buddhist monks who were traveling with them. This is history. So, and what type of Buddhism China received? We told last week it is Mahayana Buddhism. So Mahayana Buddhism became popular in China, right? And before that, so the next week we will be looking at the Chinese Buddhism, Buddhist history, and the new schools and whatever other things. But before that, for your midterm exam, we are looking at only up to the entry of Buddhism into China. What type of Buddhism that was in India, and how developments took place in India, and how Mahayana Buddhism came into existence, and why is it so popular, things like that. So, and also the basic Buddhist teachings. We were looking at basic Buddhist teachings in our one of these classes, because even though it is Mahayana Buddhism or Theravada or whatever branch of Buddhism, the basic teachings are the same. When I say basic teachings, you saw in your class that the world view of Buddhism, the way that Buddhism teaches things depends on the world view, right? So Buddhism accepts that everything is impermanent, everything is changing, and everything is suffering. When things change, you have to suffer. And there is no permanent entity called soul, anatta. This basic teaching was everywhere in Buddhist cultures, Buddhist traditions. They accept this thing. And also dependent origination. All those things are the basic four noble truths, right? So these are the basic teachings that evolved, that began in India. Excuse me. And then these teachings helped in other countries to develop new traditions, I would say. Based on these teachings, new traditions came into being. Based on Indian Mahayana Buddhism, new schools and new ideas came into being. So that's the foundation for Buddhism in East Asia. Okay, so we were just putting the foundation over the last 5 weeks. So the questions will be on that area. Don't worry about yet about the Chinese or Korean or Japanese Buddhism, but you have to be paying attention to Indian Buddhism and the preliminary setting, this type of area. So that is enough for review. And if you have any question, if you don't understand any part of it, please contact me. And so that is today's lecture, review. You will get the questions in your email, and answer the questions, not anything. You keep one thing in your mind and write something. No, that's not acceptable. I see some of you, even in your homework assignments, you are not answering the question given. You are not answering the whatever the question I asked. You say something else, which is irrelevant. So be relevant, okay? When I ask something in the question, you have to focus on that thing. You just cut and paste something from internet, and that will not give you any marks. Remember that. That will not give you any marks. Don't ever think that just sending you a midterm to me, writing something, will earn you points. No. Sorry. You have to answer the questions as much as possible. If you say something else, then that is nonsense. You don't get any points. Remember that. So I hope you can do well. And so before the beginning of next week, please submit your midterm, and then I will evaluate them and give you grades. Okay. Good luck with your midterm. Thank you. See you next week.